Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're looking at a figure in Washington whose career seems almost defined by controversy.
Absolutely. We're talking about Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. Her time in office has faced, well, intense scrutiny.
Yeah, scrutiny is one word for it. Some labels used by critics are pretty extreme, criminal, deplorable, even treasonous. It definitely raises questions.
Serious questions about integrity, allegiance,
Yeah.
the whole package, really, at least according to the sources we've reviewed.
So today we're diving into that trail, the ethics complaints, the financial questions, the political alliances. It's quite a lot.
It is, and critics claim she's, quote, covered every aspect of possible criminal activity and corruption. Strong words.
Very strong. So our mission, as always, is to stick to the facts, look at the timelines, the actual documented controversies.
Exactly. We need to separate the media spin from what's actually on the record. We'll focus on these specific accusations: federal tax fraud, immigration fraud, bigamy, kickbacks.
The stuff that led a Minnesota state representative back in 2025 to call her a, quote, serial career criminal.
Right. We'll examine the numbers, the alleged acts, the statements, basically everything that shapes this really controversial political story.
And we have to be clear, we're reporting what the sources say. And frankly, these sources often frame her entire career through the lens of what they call failed liberal immigration policies.
Yeah, that framing is definitely present in the material. What's really striking, though, is this pattern you see. A whole string of pretty severe allegations. But despite all the pressure, none seem to have resulted in a major federal conviction.
Which is a key part of the story itself.
Yeah.
So where do we start? Maybe with the money, the financial side?
Let's do that. The verifiable record really begins there, with financial and ethical issues. Even back when she was a state legislator, there were official penalties.
Okay, so before Congress even, let's unpack that. What did the state investigation actually find? What were the official rulings?
So the Minnesota Campaign Finance Board looked into her filings, covering 2017 to 2019. They officially ruled her committee misspent about, $3,469, and they also filed a payment incorrectly.
Okay, so not huge amounts, but an official finding nonetheless.
Exactly. It resulted in an official administrative action. She had to repay the money, plus pay a $500 civil penalty. That's the first sort of documented misconduct on record.
But the source material we looked at suggests critics saw more than just, bookkeeping errors. They allege something more serious, especially about payments to her husband's firm.
That's right. The allegation from critics was, and I'm quoting here, essentially money laundering from the pay fee back into her own personal accounts.
So channeling donor money back to herself via his consulting firm, that's the claim.
That's the core of the allegation, yes. That donor funds were effectively ending up back in her household.
And there was another issue, too, wasn't there? Separate from campaign funds, something about her personal taxes.
Correct. A state inquiry turned up an issue with her tax filings for 2014 and 2015. Seems she filed joint returns with a domestic partner before they were legally married.
Oh, okay. And what happened with that?
Well, this is interesting. Democrat state officials actually directed her to make corrections to those filings.
Directed corrections, so not a prosecution.
No. And the source material calls this an alleged crime, but it's crucial to note, no criminal case was ever filed.
Critics, I imagine, saw that differently.
They did. They pointed to it as, another example of using her status, whether official or social, for personal benefit, be it financial or avoiding legal trouble.
So this pattern of, let's say, documented financial irregularities really set the stage for what came next, didn't it? The much heavier allegations of personal fraud.
Exactly. That brings us to probably the most explosive part of this whole saga, the alleged immigration fraud and the claims about her marriage history.
Yeah, this is where, as the sources put it, it gets really complex. The marriage history critics call a well-known scam. Strong language again.
Very. The central claim, which has really fueled this for years, revolves around her marriage in 2009 to a man named Ahmed Elma. The explicit allegation in the source material is that she married him, quote, to break U.S. immigration law and defraud America. Essentially, to help him get legal status.
And is there any backing for that claim? Or just assertion?
Well, one source cited in some UK reports claimed she admitted she'd do, quote, what she had to do. Now, that's a secondhand claim, but it's out there.
And the timing of the marriage and divorce also plays into the critics' narrative, right?
It absolutely does. They got divorced in 2017. Critics alleged this was after the marriage was, quote, no longer needed by Elma.
Okay, but then the accusation became even more severe, didn't it, with the claim they were related?
Yes. That's when it really escalated. A report surfaced from a British company, Endeavour DNA Laboratories.
I remember hearing about this. What did it claim?
It asserted a staggering probability, a 99.99998% chance that Omar and the man she married, Ahmed Elm, are actually siblings.
Wow. I mean, that
Really?
percentage, 99.999998. The source is clearly presenting that as basically proof of incest and therefore major immigration fraud.
That's certainly how it's framed, yes. A definitive statement based on that reported DNA analysis.
So, with such an explosive claim, potentially involving serious crimes, what was the official response from federal authorities?
Well, first, Omar and her family have consistently refused any requests for an open, verifiable DNA test,
Hmm.
which, only adds fuel to the fire for critics.
Understandable. But what about the FBI? Did they look into it?
They did. Special Agent Joy Hess confirmed the FBI investigated the marriage fraud allegations. However, the case was dropped.
Dropped. Why?
The reason given by the U.S. Attorney's Office at the time was that the statute of limitations had run out.
Okay, hold on. Statute of limitations. Because the sources we read made a big point about this. They claim, quote, there is no statute of limitations on immigration fraud. So how does that work?
And that, right there, is the absolute core of the controversy surrounding the official response.
It seems like a direct contradiction.
It does. Now, the U.S. Attorney's Office was likely referring to specific laws about the time limit for prosecuting certain related crimes, maybe citing the general 5-year federal limit for non-capital offenses active back when the marriage occurred.
Okay, a legal technicality, perhaps?
Perhaps. But critics push back hard. They argue that the offense of immigration fraud itself is ongoing as long as someone maintains legal status obtained fraudulently. So no statute should apply.
And their conclusion is?
Their conclusion, as presented in the sources, is that this was political protection, that federal bodies under previous administrations were, quote, never going to hit that tripwire, essentially shielding a prominent progressive politician.
Right. Political protection is a recurring theme in the critical source material, which I guess brings us to the ballot harvesting allegations, another area where critics claimed cover-up.
Exactly. This was in September 2020. Project Veritas, the conservative group known for undercover stings.
Yeah, I remember the videos.
They released footage alleging a cash-for-ballot scheme operating in Minneapolis, specifically within Omar's district.
What did the videos purport to show?
They showed activists apparently collecting absentee ballots from voters, sometimes exchanging cash. Critics jumped on this as clear proof of election fraud designed to boost Omar's campaign.
Okay, so pretty damning footage, at least on the surface. What was the official outcome of that investigation?
Well, the Federal Election Commission, the FEC, this was under the Biden administration, they looked into the complaint.
And
they unanimously closed it. Their finding was that no election laws were actually broken based on the evidence presented.
unanimously closed. But critics, predictably, disagreed.
Strongly. They maintained this was just another instance of the administration providing political cover, dismissing what they saw as, quote, clear evidence to the contrary.
So we've covered the documented financial issues, these really severe but legally unresolved fraud allegations. Now let's shift to her public statements, because critics use her own words as evidence too, right? Claiming a lack of allegiance to the U.S.
Yes. This moves us from potential legal issues to her rhetoric, her foreign policy stances, and what critics label as, frankly, treasonous statements.
Treasonous is a heavy charge. What specific examples do the sources highlight?
One of the most cited incidents happened right on the House floor. She made a statement where she said she was there to look out for, quote, her country, meaning Somalia.
Wow. On the House floor, saying Somalia was her country.
That's how it was reported and widely interpreted, yes. And that specific comment, according to the source material, directly led to calls for her expulsion from Congress, even for revoking her citizenship under federal treason laws.
The sources frame that as what? Ungrateful, disloyal.
The phrasing used in one source was exceedingly poor judgment and an ungrateful attitude toward her adopted nation. It clearly fueled the narrative of dual allegiance.
And this ties into controversies around her foreign policy too, especially regarding Israel.
Definitely.
Yeah.
In 2019, she and another congresswoman, Rashida Tlaib, were actually barred from entering Israel.
Why was that?
It was because of their vocal support for the BDS movement. Boycott, divestment, sanctions against Israel. Opponents of BDS often label the movement itself as anti-Semitic.
Right. And her social media use around that time also caused the stir, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Probably the most infamous was her tweet in February 2019, the one where she wrote, It's all about the Benjamin's baby.
Yeah, I remember the backlash to that one.
Huge backlash. It was widely condemned for using what critics call an anti-Semitic trope, the idea that Jewish money controls politics.
Did she explain it? Apologize.
She did offer an apology later, say she only intended to critique the influence of lobbying money in politics generally, not single out any group. But the tweet itself, it's part of her verifiable record now, and it definitely feeds the critical narrative.
And wasn't there another tweet a couple of years later that even got a response from the Speaker of the House at the time?
Yes, in 2021. This one compared the actions of the United States and Israel to groups like Hamas, Islamic Jihad, Hezbollah, and the Taliban.
Comparing the U.S. and Israel to terrorist groups.
That's how it was read, implying a kind of moral equivalence. It caused such an uproar that then Speaker Nancy Pelosi, a leader in Omar's own party, publicly rebuked her. Pelosi explicitly condemned equating democracies like the U.S. and Israel with terrorist organizations.
Okay. And then finally, the sources mentioned some comments she made about a conservative commentator after his death.
Right. This involved the late Charlie Kirk. After his passing, Omar made some highly controversial remarks.
What did she say?
She referred to him as Dr. Frankenstein and stated that his legacy should be relegated to the dustbin of history.
Wow. That's harsh, especially after someone's death.
Critics certainly saw it that way. They pointed to it as showing, well, extreme contempt for political opponents, even in death. A sort of lack of basic decorum, they argued.
Okay, so if we pull all these threads together, the documented financial penalties, the really serious but unresolved immigration fraud claims, the allegations of political cover-ups, and then this pattern of polarizing rhetoric, what's the main takeaway from the critical sources we're looking at?
I think the critical takeaway is how this combination paints a picture. You have documented administrative misconduct, the fines, the tax corrections. And critics use that verifiable record to lend weight to the much more severe allegations like bigamy and immigration fraud, even though those were ultimately dismissed, often on procedural grounds like the statute of limitations.
So the pattern is proven smaller issues, validating suspected bigger ones in the eyes of critics.
Exactly. It creates this persistent cloud of controversy. Her career, viewed through this lens, shows these documented ethical lapses alongside these huge federally dodged allegations, and the procedural dismissals are then framed as politically motivated protection.
What really stands out then is just the sheer volume of these serious claims, financial, personal fraud, allegiance that keep swirling around her, yet never seem to result in federal prosecution. Which, for critics, looks like the system is rigged.
Right. The controversy isn't necessarily sustained by convictions, because there aren't major ones. It's sustained by this accumulation of official findings on smaller matters, which are then used to validate the more explosive, unproven claims.
Okay, which brings us to our final thought for you, the listener, to chew on. Back in 2025, State Representative Juskowski called for another congressional ethics investigation.
Right, and he cited a list of potential federal charges: tax fraud, immigration fraud, perjury, kickbacks, all the greatest hits, so to speak.
And the source material specifically notes that critics speculate these charges, quote, may get federal traction now that the DOJ is not in liberal hands.
That's the speculation.
So here's the question for you. Considering that past federal investigations were dropped based on things like the statute of limitations procedural grounds, how much would a change in the political party controlling the Department of Justice really impact the outcome of these longstanding controversies? Could new investigations overcome those previous hurdles, or would they face the same challenges? That's something to think about.